Hello, I'm Dr. Greg Mock. Thanks for joining me today. I'm going to speak today on Fred Smith. And it's difficult to think of a name more common than Fred Smith, but what Fred Smith accomplished was anything but common. So, Fred Smith, if you don't know, was the founder and CEO of Federal Express, and he just passed away here in the last couple of weeks. And he left behind a great legacy. Now, to him, he said that his legacy was going to be his children, which is a great thought and very true. But he left behind a great business legacy as well. Mr. Smith was born in 1944 in Mississippi. He was actually born into an upper middle class family. His dad was an entrepreneur as well. His dad started the Greyhound bus line in that area of the southern U.S. It was called Dixie Greyhound. And he also had a whole chain when back then, really, chains of restaurants were different. But he owned a whole chain of restaurants on which the Waffle House was modeled after his chain of restaurants. So he was a very successful businessman and entrepreneur. But unfortunately, he died when Fred Jr. was just 4 years old. But that legacy his father left him allowed Fred Smith, in his mind, to know if you got a great idea and you work hard, you can be successful. So, Fred Smith Jr., we'll just call him from now on Smith. His dad was Fred Smith Sr., but Jr. was kind of your typical entrepreneur. He was one of these people who early on exhibited a lot of you could tell he was going to be a success. So by the time he was 15, he was already a licensed pilot, for example. By the time he was 18, he had helped found a recording studio in Memphis that became what's called Ardent Records, which he left it at 18 to go on to Yale to college, but the other founders went on, and it became a nationwide known studio that recorded a lot of major hit records. So at Yale, Mr. Smith didn't necessarily stand out as a great student. He said he always got a gentleman's C, but still, he probably is. That's a bit of self-deprecation. He was very good friends with people like John Kerry, who he was friends with his whole life. And one of his fraternity brothers was the future president, George W. Bush, who he stayed close friends with all his life. So, so he was making his mark early on. Well, when he graduated from Yale, instead of going into business, he joined the Marine Corps, and he went to OCS and served 2 tours in combat in Vietnam, and as a Marine officer, one as an infantry officer, as a company commander, and then also as a forward aircraft controller out, So anyway, he was in the thick of things. He won a Silver Star, Bronze Star, and was wounded twice and 2 Purple Hearts. So after he got out Vietnam and finished his Marine service, then he moved into his business thing, and he took what he learned in the Marines is what he used to run his businesses. Now, when he was back at Yale, he wrote a term paper, and he had the idea. He looked and said, boy, the post office is terrible, as we all know. It was even worse then. And he said, hey, this is my idea for delivering mail overnight with a hub and spoke system. And so, which was very revolutionary thinking at that time. Well, once he was out of the Marines, started his business, he decided he was going to do this. And so at 26, he was able to raise somewhere between 80 and 90 million dollars of venture capital. That would be like a 26-year-old raising $700 million today. So that in and of itself was an incredible thing. Then he put his thought into thing and worked hard on it. Almost went under 2 or 3 times, but was able to pull out of the nosedive he was in. So he was super successful at that, and it was because he had the typical entrepreneurial skills of identifying something that's wrong, figuring out a way to attack that, planning it, following through, doing that, working his tail off to get it done, and eventually he was quite successful. So today, Federal Express, and he only stepped down a couple years ago. and has stayed on as still as the executive chairman, I guess is what he was called. But anyway, he ran that for over 50 years. And so now it's a 500,000 employees, more than a 500,000, over 220 countries he works in. I've had personal, so one of the histopath labs we used in my practice, when we do a surgery and need to send off, say, a tumor or something, FedEx would pick it up, and it was in Utah at the lab the next morning. I don't know how they did it, but they did it. It is amazing. So Fred Smith accomplished a great thing and was a great entrepreneur. And you really, if you get a chance, read more about him. He was an amazing person. Thank you.